Why did you throw us away like trash? Mother. The entire ballroom went silent. Two identical men stood at the entrance, their eyes locked on Zainab. We survived the night you wanted us dead. Zainab's glass slipped from her hand and shattered. Her past had finally returned. 25 years earlier, the wind howled through the dry grass like a hungry animal. Zainab stood by the lonely roadside, her heart beating against her ribs. In her arms were two small bundles wrapped in a thin, faded cloth. They were so light, yet they felt like lead weights, pulling her into the earth. She looked left and right, but the Lagos outskirts were empty and dark. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, as if it did not want to watch what she was about to do. Her husband had died in debt, and her in-laws had chased her out. She had no food, no home, and no hope. One of the babies started to cry, a high, thin sound that pierced the night. Zainab's eyes filled with tears, but her face stayed hard. She knelt and placed the bundles under a large tree. She whispered a quick prayer that she didn't really believe in. Then, she turned around and began to run. She did not look back, even when the crying grew louder. Suddenly, a tall shadow stepped out from behind a nearby bus stop. The shadow moved toward the tree where the babies lay. Zainab felt a chill, but she kept running into the dark night. The shadow was a woman named Sister Martha, who lived in a small shack nearby. She had been watching from the bushes, wondering why a woman would be out so late. Martha reached down and picked up the two crying infants. Their skin was cold, and their tiny hands were reaching out for warmth. Martha looked toward the direction where Zainab had disappeared, shaking her head in deep sadness. "You poor little things," Martha whispered, tucking them closer to her chest. "Your mother thinks she has ended your story, but she is wrong. You were not meant to die on this cold dirt." She noticed a small mark on the cloth, the initials ZN sewn into the corner. Martha knew she couldn't keep them forever, but she knew she had to keep them safe for now. As she walked back to her shack, she felt a strange power coming from the children. She smiled a very strange, knowing smile. She knew that destiny had a long memory and an even longer reach. Far away, Zainab reached the city center and wiped her face. She promised herself she would never be poor again. She would bury the memory of this night forever. 25 years passed like a flickering candle. Zainab was no longer the broken woman on the roadside. She was now a queen of industry, owning the largest shipping company in the country. She lived in a mansion that looked like a palace, surrounded by gold and glass. Everyone respected her, and everyone feared her. She had married a powerful man named Chief Oga, who believed she was a pure, childless widow when they met. Zainab worked hard to keep her past in a deep, dark grave. One morning, her young maid was cleaning the living room and mentioned a news story. "Madam, did you see the report about the abandoned babies found in the forest?" the maid asked innocently. Zainab's glass of orange juice slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. She turned on the girl with a face full of sudden rage. "Do not bring such disgusting stories into my house," she screamed. The maid trembled and quickly knelt to pick up the glass. Zainab walked to the window, her heart racing just like it did that night. Outside, she saw a black car parked across the street. A man was watching her house, in a small, neat apartment on the other side of town. Two young men sat at a wooden table. They were identical in every way, from their sharp jawlines to the way they held their pens. Their names were David and Daniel. They were the babies Martha had saved and raised with the help of a kind priest. They didn't grow up in wealth, but they grew up with a burning desire for the truth. On the table lay the old, faded cloth with the initials ZN. They had spent years studying old records and tracking down anyone who lived near that roadside. "This is the place, Daniel," David said, pointing at a photo of Zainab's mansion. "This is where the woman who left us lives. She is rich, she is famous, and she thinks we are dead." Daniel touched the cloth, his eyes cold and hard like flint. "She didn't just leave us, David. She threw us away like we were trash on the street. Now she is living a perfect life built on a lie." They stood up and looked in the mirror, adjusting their suits. They looked like young princes ready for war. "It is time to meet our mother," David whispered to his reflection. It was the night of Zainab's 50th birthday party. The mansion was glowing with thousands of fairy lights, and the scent of expensive lilies filled the air. The most powerful people in the country were there, drinking fine wine and laughing. Zainab wore a dress made of pure silk that shimmered like water. She stood next to Chief Oga, smiling for the cameras, looking like the happiest woman on earth. She felt invincible. Her secrets were buried so deep that she almost believed they didn't exist. Suddenly, her head of security leaned in and whispered in her ear, "Madam, there are 2 young men at the gate. They don't have invitations, but they say they have a delivery for you." Zainab frowned, feeling a small prickle of annoyance. "Tell them to leave it with the cook," she replied. The security guard looked worried. "They say it is a personal gift from 25 years ago, madam. They refuse to move." Zainab felt the blood drain from her face. The glass in her hand felt very heavy. She looked toward the grand entrance as the large oak doors slowly began to swing open. The music in the ballroom didn't stop immediately, but the air seemed to get colder. 2 young men walked in, moving with a grace that made people stop talking. They were dressed in simple but perfectly tailored black suits. They didn't look like beggars or criminals. They looked like they belonged in the room. As they walked toward the center of the floor, the guests began to whisper, "Who are they? They look so familiar," someone said. Zainab stood frozen behind her birthday cake. Her eyes were locked on their faces. She saw her own eyes looking back at her. She saw the shape of her late husband's nose and the curve of his chin. It was like looking at 2 ghosts that had decided to put on skin and bone. The twins stopped exactly 5 feet away from her. The entire room went silent as the band finally stopped playing. David took a step forward and bowed slightly, but his eyes stayed fixed on Zainab's trembling lips. "Happy birthday, Mother," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. The guests gasped, and Chief Oga turned to his wife in total confusion. Zainab felt like the floor was turning into water. She tried to speak, but her throat felt like it was full of sand. She looked at her husband, whose face was turning a dark shade of red. "What is the meaning of this?" Chief Oga demanded, looking from the twins to Zainab. Zainab finally found her voice, but it was high and shaky. I don't know these people. Security. Why are they inside my house?" she screamed. She pointed a shaking finger at the twins, her face twisting into a mask of fake anger. "They are crazy. They are trying to extort me because I am a successful woman." The guests began to nod, thinking maybe it was just a scam. But Daniel didn't look bothered by her shouting. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, plastic bag. Inside was the old, dirty cloth with the Zien initials. He held it up so the cameras and the guests could see it. "This cloth was wrapped around us the night you left us under a tree near the Lagos outskirts," Daniel said calmly. "You didn't even give us names. You just gave us a cold night." The sight of the cloth hit Zainab like a physical blow to the stomach. The smells of that dark night, the damp earth and the dry grass, came rushing back into her mind. She could hear the thin crying of the babies in her ears. She felt a wave of dizziness and had to grab the edge of the table to keep from falling. The room was spinning. The silence of the guests was the loudest thing she had ever heard. They were all staring at her, waiting for a reaction. Chief Oga took the plastic bag from Daniel's hand and looked at the initials. He knew that Zainab's maiden name started with N. He looked at his wife, and for the first time, he saw the guilt written in the lines around her eyes. "Zainab," he whispered, his voice full of pain. "Is this true? Did you have children you never told me about?" Zainab shook her head violently, tears finally breaking through. "No, it's a lie. They found that cloth in the trash. They are actors." One twin stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "We know everything, Zainab. We know who you were before the gold. Get out. Get them out of here now." Zainab shrieked, her voice cracking. The security guards finally moved in, grabbing the twins by their arms. The guests backed away, some looking disgusted and others looking curious. The twins did not struggle. They let the guards lead them toward the exit, but they didn't look defeated. As they reached the door, David turned back one last time. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked almost sorry for her. He gave a small, chilling smile that made the hair on Zainab's neck stand up. "We are leaving for now, Mother," David said loudly. "But you cannot kick the truth out of your heart as easily as you kicked us out of your house. This is just the beginning of our reunion." The door slammed shut behind them. The party was ruined. People began to make excuses to leave, whispering to each other as they walked to their cars. Zainab stood in the middle of the empty ballroom, surrounded by expensive decorations that now felt like trash. She felt a cold shadow falling over her life, and she knew she couldn't run this time. The next morning, the story was all over the internet. People were calling Zainab the Ice Queen Mother. The twins were not sitting idly by. They began to release more information to the public. They had found the old hospital records where Zainab had given birth in secret. They found an old neighbor who remembered the young, pregnant widow who disappeared one night and came back without her belly or her babies. They discovered that Zainab had completely changed her identity when she moved to the city. She had lied about her age, her family, and her history. Every new piece of evidence was like a brick being pulled from the wall of Zainab's life. She stayed locked in her room, refusing to take calls. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, seeing the young woman she used to be. She realized that she had spent 25 years building a beautiful house on a foundation of sand. The twins were not just looking for a mother, they were looking for justice. They were stripping away her lies one by one, and she was powerless to stop the world from seeing the truth. Chief Oga was a man who valued his reputation above everything else. He was a deacon in his church and a leader in the community. Seeing his wife's face on every tabloid and blog was more than he could bear. He didn't sleep in their shared bedroom that night. He spent hours walking around his library, looking at the photos of them together. He realized he didn't really know the woman he had married 10 years ago. Every time he asked about her past, she would get emotional or change the subject. Now he knew why. He felt like a fool who had been tricked by a beautiful face. His phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from business partners asking if the rumors were true. He decided he needed to hear the truth from the source. He tracked down the phone number for the twins and called them. "This is Chief Oga," he said when someone answered. "I want to meet you. Alone. No cameras, no lawyers." David's voice was calm on the other end. "We've been waiting for your call, Chief. We will meet you at the old chapel on 4th Street. The meeting at the chapel was quiet and tense. The air smelled of old wood and candle wax. Chief Oga sat in the front pew, his hands trembling slightly. When the twins walked in, he was struck again by how much they looked like Zainab. There was no doubt in his heart anymore. They sat down across from him, and for an hour, they told him their story. They told him about Sister Martha and the priest who raised them. They showed him the birth certificate they had recovered from a dusty archive. It had Zainab's thumbprint on it. They showed him a letter she had written to her late husband's sister, admitting she was overwhelmed by the twins. Chief Oga felt a deep, hollow pain in his chest. He saw that these were not greedy boys looking for money. They were hurt men looking for an explanation. "She told me she couldn't have children," Chief Oga whispered, leaning his head in his hands. "She told me it was her greatest sorrow." Daniel looked at him with a hard gaze. Her greatest sorrow was being poor, Chief. When Chief Oga returned to the mansion, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Zainab was pacing the living room, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She ran to him, trying to hold his arm. "My husband, please. You must help me. We can pay them to go away. We can say it's a political plot against us," she cried. Chief Oga pushed her hands away with a look of pure disgust. "I met them, Zainab," he said coldly. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. "I saw the birth certificate. I saw the letter. I saw the truth in their faces." Zainab began to babble, making up more lies. But Chief Oga held up his hand to silence her. "Every word you say makes me hate you more," he said. Zainab's fear suddenly turned into a dark, desperate anger. She realized she was losing everything: her marriage, her money, and her status. If she couldn't hide the truth, she would have to destroy it. That night, while her husband slept in the guest room, Zainab made a phone call to a man she hadn't spoken to in years. He was a man who solved problems for a high price. The man Zainab hired was a professional thug named Shark. She told him where the twins were staying and gave him a clear instruction: Scare them so badly they leave the country. If they don't listen, make sure they can never speak again. She felt a twisted sense of relief after she hung up. She told herself she was doing what she had to do to survive. But she didn't know that David and Daniel were not ordinary boys. They had grown up on the tough streets before the priest found them. They were always on guard. When Shark and his men broke into their apartment at midnight, the twins were already awake. The room was dark, but the twins moved like shadows. They used the heavy furniture and their knowledge of the small space to trap the attackers. Within minutes, Shark was on the floor, pinned down by Daniel, while David held a heavy metal pipe. "Who sent you?" David asked, his voice like ice. Shark was terrified. He hadn't expected these rich boys to fight like lions. The woman from the mansion," he gasped. "She paid us to silence you." The twins realized that their mother was more dangerous than they had imagined. She wasn't just a liar. She was a predator. They knew they couldn't just wait for her to change her mind. They needed a witness who could break her completely. They went to a small village on the outskirts of state to find the one person who knew the whole story. It was Sister Martha. She was old now, her hair white and her skin wrinkled like a dried plum, but her mind was as sharp as a needle. When she saw the twins, she wept with joy. "I knew you would come for the truth one day," she said. She told them that she had actually spoken to Zainab a week after she dumped the babies. She had gone to the city to tell her the babies were safe, but Zainab had threatened to kill her if she ever spoke of them again. "She chose her new life over your breath," Martha said, clutching their hands. "But the blood of a child never stops calling to the earth. It is time for me to speak." The twins and Martha began to organize their final move. They didn't want a quiet confession. They wanted the whole world to see Zainab for who she really was. They worked with a famous investigative journalist to prepare a massive expose. They gathered every document, every witness, and every recording they had. Meanwhile, Zainab was becoming more and more paranoid. She felt like the walls of her mansion were closing in on her. She heard whispers in every hallway. She stayed awake at night, clutching a bottle of wine, staring at the security monitors. She saw the news that a major Truth Commission event was going to be held at the National Stadium, and her name was on the list of people being investigated for past social crimes. She knew this was it. She tried to flee the country, but she found that her bank accounts had been frozen by the government due to the fraud in her business that the twins had also uncovered. She was trapped in her own golden cage, waiting for the final blow to fall. The day of the public ceremony arrived. It was a massive event meant to celebrate women in leadership, and Zainab was supposed to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award. She decided to attend, thinking that if she showed up and looked powerful, she could still win. She wore her most expensive gold lace and a head tie that looked like a crown. She arrived in a convoy of cars, forcing a smile for the flashing cameras. As she sat on the stage with other dignitaries, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she could still charm her way out of this. The Master of Ceremonies stood up to announce the next part of the program. "Before we give out the final award, we have a special presentation from two young men who have a story about the true meaning of leadership and sacrifice," he said. The crowd went silent as David and Daniel walked onto the stage. They weren't wearing suits this time. They were wearing the same kind of simple clothes they wore when they were growing up. The tension in the air was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. David took the microphone first. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked directly at Zainab, who was sitting just 10 feet away. 25 years ago, a woman made a choice, he began. His voice was steady and carried to every corner of the stadium. She decided that her comfort was more important than the lives of her own blood. She left 2 babies to be eaten by animals or die of cold. Zainab felt her heart hammering in her chest. She couldn't stay silent anymore. She stood up, her face red with fury. "This is a lie. This is a setup," she screamed, her voice echoing through the speakers. "I am a woman of God. I am a pillar of this community. You are trying to destroy a successful woman because you are lazy and jealous." She looked at the crowd, pleading for support, but the people were not cheering for her. They were looking at her with cold, judging eyes. She realized that her screaming only made her look more guilty. She tried to walk off the stage, but the security guards blocked her path. "The story is not finished, madam," Daniel said. "We have a witness," Daniel announced. The crowd parted as a small, elderly woman was helped onto the stage by two nurses. It was Sister Martha. When Zainab saw her, she let out a small, strangled sound like a trapped bird. She recognized the woman from all those years ago. Martha took the microphone with trembling hands. "Zainab," she said, her voice thin but clear. "I told you 25 years ago that God was watching." The stadium erupted in gasps and shouts. Martha turned to the audience. "I am the one who picked them up. I am the one who saw this woman run away, while her children screamed for her. I have kept the cloth they were wrapped in for 2 decades as proof of her shame." Martha held up the cloth, and the giant screens in the stadium showed a close-up of the ZN initials. The truth was now visible to thousands of people. There was no more room for lies or excuses. The twins then began to play an audio recording on the stadium's massive sound system. It was the recording of Zainab's phone call to Shark, the thug. Her own voice filled the air, cold and calculating, as she discussed silencing her sons. "Make sure they can never speak again." Her voice boomed over the crowd. The silence that followed was terrifying. Even the people who wanted to believe in her were now horrified. Chief Oga, who was sitting in the VIP section, stood up and walked toward the stage. He looked at Zainab, and the love that had been there for 10 years was completely gone. He took off his wedding ring and threw it at her feet. "You are not a woman," he said, his voice full of a quiet, deadly anger. "You are a monster in a silk dress." Zainab looked around, seeing the faces of her friends, her business partners, and her husband. They all looked at her as if she were a poisonous snake. She felt a wave of heat wash over her, and her knees finally gave out. Zainab collapsed onto the stage, her gold head tie falling off, and her expensive hair becoming a mess. She began to sob, not the fake tears of a victim, but the real, ugly tears of someone who has lost everything. "I had no choice," she wailed into the microphone. "I was starving. I was alone. I want a future." She crawled toward the twins, trying to grab their feet. "Please, I am your mother. I gave you life. You cannot do this to me." The crowd booed and hissed. The irony was not lost on anyone. The woman who had abandoned her children for wealth was now begging those same children to save her from the consequences of that wealth. David looked down at her, his face showing no emotion. "You gave us life, but you didn't give us a mother," he said. "You gave that job to a stranger while you were busy buying diamonds." He stepped back, refusing to let her touch him. The cameras caught every second of her breakdown, broadcasting her shame to the entire nation. As the chaos on stage continued, a strange thing happened. Daniel, the twin who had been the angriest throughout the journey, felt a sudden pang of pity. He saw a broken woman, not a powerful queen. He looked at his brother. "Maybe we have done enough, David," he whispered. "We have the truth. We don't need to destroy her life completely." But David's eyes remained hard. "She tried to kill us, Daniel. She hasn't changed. She is only sorry because she got caught." The two brothers stood there, representing the two sides of justice, mercy, and punishment. The crowd watched the internal conflict between the twins. It was a powerful moment that showed the deep scars Zainab had left on them. They were identical in face, but their hearts were now moving in different directions. One twin wanted to walk away and forget she ever existed, while the other wanted to make sure she felt every ounce of the pain they had felt. The tension between them was almost as dramatic as the confrontation with their mother. The police eventually arrived on stage to take Zainab away for questioning regarding the hiring of the thugs and the financial fraud. As they led her away in handcuffs, the crowd fell into a strange, respectful silence. Her reputation had collapsed in a single hour. Her companies would be seized. Her mansion would be sold to pay her debts, and her name would be a curse in the streets of Lagos. She looked back at the twins one last time as she was pushed into the back of a police car. She saw them standing tall, side by side, finally free of the shadow she had cast over them. She realized that by trying to bury her past, she had ensured it would be the only thing people remembered about her. She was a woman who had everything but possessed nothing. The car drove away, leaving a cloud of dust behind. The Ice Queen was gone, and in her place was just a woman who had made a terrible mistake and spent a lifetime trying to hide it. A week later, the twins stood at the same roadside where it all began. The tree was still there, though it was much larger now. They brought Sister Martha with them. They had used some of the money they received from their book and movie deals to build Martha a beautiful new house. They stood in silence, looking at the spot where they had once lay as helpless infants. "She thought this was the end of us," Daniel said, placing a hand on the tree trunk. "But it was actually the beginning of our strength." David nodded. "We don't need her love to be whole. We have each other, and we have the truth." They felt a sense of peace they had never known before. They were no longer the abandoned twins. They were the men who had faced the darkness and won. They decided to start a foundation for abandoned children, to make sure no other baby would ever have to feel the cold of the roadside without someone coming to pick them up. The story ends not with a grand party, but with a quiet moment of grace. Zainab was sentenced to several years in prison. She spent her days scrubbing floors, the very work she had looked down upon for so long. She had a small photo of the twins in her cell, a photo from the stadium. She looked at it every day, wondering what might have been if she had just been brave enough to be poor and a mother. One day, a small package arrived for her. Inside was a new, clean blanket and a note. The note didn't have a name, but it said, "We forgive you, but we cannot know you. Live your life with the truth." Zainab clutched the blanket and wept quietly. The twins walked away from the prison gates, never looking back. They had found their destiny, and it was a path they had built themselves, far away from the lies of the past. Justice had been served, but more importantly, the cycle of pain had finally been broken. The sun set over the city, golden and bright, promising a new day.